Hey everyone, welcome back to class. Today we're going to talk about free market capitalism, and we're actually going to start talking about this for the next few weeks. I really want to dissect the arguments for and against free market capitalism. And what I really want you guys to do while we go through these next few lessons is to try to have an open mind and try to understand both sides of the argument. I am willing to guess most of you already have a very strong opinion on free market capitalism. Maybe some of you are for and some of you are against. But I really want you to understand the pros and the cons and the arguments for both sides, because there are very good arguments for both sides. It's not just as simple as free market capitalism is the best ever or free market capitalism is the worst ever. If it was that simple, the world would probably just choose one or the other. But there are very, very smart people who will argue on both sides of this. And I want you guys to at least understand the main arguments for and against free market capitalism. So today's lesson is going to be an argument for free market capitalism. A lot of this is stuff we already kind of hit at various parts of the year, but I kind of just decided I'm going to recap it all in one quick session here. So free market capitalism, why is it good? Well, the big argument is that it makes everyone wealthier. Now you might be saying, does it really make everyone wealthier? I kind of feel like it just makes the wealthy wealthier and it makes the poor poorer. Well, the argument is they say a rising tide raises all ships. This is kind of the argument for free market capitalism. It says that even though it might make the wealthier quite wealthier, it is also making the poor better off than they otherwise would have been. Now, this raises the next question, which is, have people really been getting wealthier? Like, are people really better off than they were 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 500 years ago? And to kind of address this question, I want to play the game we've played before, but we're about to play it again. What if someone from the year 1500 went to Bill Gates' house? Well, what would they really be amazed by? First, they'd be amazed that this guy had running water just coming out of a thing like in his kitchen. That he could just turn it on and water came out. He didn't have to go outside, hit a well, anything like that. They'd probably be amazed by the refrigerator. He can keep foods cold year round. Even in that hot Texas summer, he can keep foods chilled, and he has this other magical box that keeps foods frozen year round, and it preserves food for so long. He doesn't even have to go kill an animal every day. It's amazing. He has one of these on the wall that keeps a constant temperature inside his house. When it's cold in the winter outside, it's 72 inside. And when it's hot in the summer outside, it is 72 inside. He's got one of these things. He doesn't have to go outside to go to the bathroom. He has a special room in his house where he goes to the bathroom. That must be disgusting, you think. No, it's not that bad. He's got little fans in the ceiling that take the smell away. And his waste is just magically whooshed out of the house with barely any mess at all. He's got hot water that comes out of the wall anytime he wants. He's got music anytime he wants. Back in the year 1500, you had to hire a band to play in your bathroom if you wanted to listen to music in the shower. Bill Gates can listen to music in the shower whenever he wants. He has this big metal box that is like way faster than horses, and it doesn't even need one horse to pull it. It's fantastic. He has this other metal tube thing that can fly. He can fly. So that's pretty amazing. And I think where you guys see where I'm going with all this is that a lot of the things that would probably be the most impressive about Bill Gates' house and lifestyle are things we all have access to. Now, of course, Bill Gates is getting a heck of a lot more leg room when he flies in one of these metal tubes than what I do, but nonetheless, I have access to all of these things that he has access to, and that nobody in the year 1500 would have had access to. Now, not everybody in the world has access to all of these things, but that percentage is growing, and it's still, anybody who has access to these things definitely has something that they did not have 500 years ago. And most of these things people didn't even have 200 years ago. And, this is just the tip of the iceberg, obviously, right? I didn't even mention computers, TV, the internet, vacuum cleaners, microwave ovens, you name it, right? We all have access to all of these things, and a lot of the world does too. And one thing that a lot of us have access to is just food. There are, of course, some people in the world who, don't know where their food is going to come from tomorrow, but that percentage is probably smaller than it's ever been in history, even as the world's population is extraordinarily larger than it used to be. We all have access to food, and the difference between not having food and having food, I would argue, is a bigger jump in wealth than going from $50,000 a year to $5 million a year. The fact that so much of the world is well fed today is a testament to the wealth of the modern world. Now, you might say, well, is that really capitalism and the free market that's brought about all these things? Isn't it technological innovation? Isn't it better trade? Well, yes, it is. It's absolutely those things. But the argument is that capitalism is the engine that drives these other things. Capitalism is the engine that drives trade and technological advancement, and that brings us increased wealth. So that is the big argument for capitalism, or argument number one, that it makes everyone wealthier. Argument number two is that free markets do a really good job of figuring out what we all want. How many sandwiches should Austin, Texas bake tomorrow? How many sandwiches? Nobody knows. There's not one person who decides that number. It just happens. It happens through the process of the free market. Because if some sandwich maker makes way too many sandwiches, they waste money and they go out of business. If some sandwich maker makes way too few sandwiches, well, they learn to make more the next day, and the right number of sandwiches just happens. How many cars do we make for the United States in a year, or for the world in a year? It just happens, right? We don't end up with like this long waiting list of people who can afford a car but can't buy one because there's not enough. The right number of cars gets produced for the people who have the resources to purchase one. Rice is another example, right? Like, how much rice should the world grow? There's nobody who makes that decision. It just happens through a series of all the people who want to buy rice buying what they want to buy, and then all the people who can grow things, the right number of those people decide to grow rice because of what we call price signals that are sent up the chain, and this is just how the free market works. It's the magic hand. Now you might say, Mike Franz, there's no toilet paper in the stores right now. Failure of the free market. They didn't know we were going to want all that toilet paper. Well, here's the response to that. So the response would be that this is a very temporary blip, that in a few weeks there will probably be enough toilet paper, and that the increase in demand was so sudden that no other system could have possibly been prepared for it anyway. So the argument would be that the free market is actually going to do a good job of replenishing these shelves. But there's another factor here, which is that the free market is not totally at work when it comes to toilet paper right now. A lot of cities and states have price caps so that you cannot raise the price of a product beyond a certain amount in a certain amount of time. Or we talked about these earlier in the year. They'd be called anti-gouging laws. If the price of toilet paper had been allowed to go up as that increased demand happened, I suspect we wouldn't have run out of toilet paper. If the free market had been allowed to work truly freely, I suspect toilet paper would have never ran out. And either way, I'm going to go out on a limb and say, unless we hit a complete economic fallout, we're going to have toilet paper back on the shelves as quick as they can make it. And the free market is good at figuring out things we didn't even know we wanted, because nobody in the year 1985 was saying, man, I wish I had a smartphone, right? But the free market figured out that people wanted these, and it produced them very rapidly. This is what phones look like for most of the middle of the 1900s. Phones in the United States used to be very much not on the free market. AT&T provided all phones, and if you had a phone, you rented it from AT&T. And AT&T was what we'd call a regulated monopoly. It was a monopoly that was kind of regulated and allowed by the United States government. And when this monopoly fell in the early 1980s, after phones had looked like this for decades with very little innovation, all of a sudden phones exploded in terms of technological advancements. Within a few years, you had answering machines, you had wireless phones, then cellular telephones, and of course, phones have turned into what we know today as smartphones. Now, the final little argument in favor of capitalism is that the one time we've kind of experimented with anti-capitalism or communism, capitalism came out looking better. Now, of course, this really just happened kind of like one time. We're in, the 1950s-ish. A lot of the world went over to full-on communism, and a lot of the world went on to full-on capitalism, and they really kind of stayed on two different tracks. We really only tried the experiment once, right? So is it possible communism could look a lot better if it was tried differently somewhere else in time? Perhaps. But the one time it's been tried and kind of tested empirically, communism certainly came out looking pretty poorly compared to free markets. And that's a wrap. And here's a little scene from just the communist days where shortages were rampant on a daily basis, lines to get products were long on a daily basis, and wealth did not grow quite at the rate it did in the free market West. So here's what I want you guys to do for your little homework tonight. I want you to send me all of the arguments you can think of against capitalism. I want everybody to send at least one argument, even if you're already just like this super pro-capitalist, like, you're all about it. Send me an argument you know of, right? Everybody's heard arguments against capitalism. And for those of you who are like, we should be communist, capitalism's the worst ever, burn it down, send me as many arguments as you like, and we'll address these in class on Thursday and Friday. Thanks for tuning in, even though you didn't really have a choice, and see you in class. See you on the internet.